Thank you, Les. Again, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Funding the Dream Banquet, an live online event. Funding the Dream is presented by Lands, Inc. Our virtual partner is Taylor Construction and Design. Throughout this evening, you'll be made aware of the many community-minded partners and individuals that help make Funding the Dream possible. Lifeline, Community, and Navigate are programs available for people dealing with addiction and their family members that don't know where to turn for non-residential resources that are available. For more information about Navigate and Lifeline Community, please see the information packets located at each one of your tables. All of the brochures and printed materials were generously donated by Minuteman Press, and the designs were done by Carrie Hurd. We're going to have an excited evening highlighted by tremendous testimonies, a delicious meal, and an inspiring message from our guest, the voice of the Illini, the Bulls, and the Bears. Tim Sinclair is our special guest speaker tonight. Our goal tonight is to help raise the annual working budget for Lifeline-connect. Here are some sobering numbers that might grab your attention. 50,000. That was the number of deaths from opioids in 2019. $78.5 billion. That is the economic burden, according to the CDC, from opioid. $10,000 to $25,000 or more. That is the average cost for inpatient treatment, typically less than 90 days. $685 a day. That's the cost for the annual budget for Lifeline Connect. $500. That is the cost for 1 full year of inpatient recovery for men in the program. And that's not monthly, ladies and gentlemen. That is a one-time fee that Lifeline Connect requires of each and every resident, $500. And that is our mission here today, is to help raise the funds so that more people that need help can get the help that is so desperately needed. Now, I'm an HVAC guy, and there's lots of HVAC people here with Lands and Carrier and Train and Holt. And so it almost feels like one of our conventions with so many HVAC people. But one of the things that we talk about in our business is the benefit of monthly payments and maintenance programs. I would like to encourage everyone here tonight to think about a monthly gift in any denomination that you might feel compelled or can afford. Remember, many hands lighten the load. As we get going with this program tonight, I would like to reflect with some thanks and gratitude. I want to once again thank all of our premier partners, different makers, friends of, our presenting partner, and our online partner. We'd like to thank all of the faithful donors of Lifeline Connect. Thank you again to the table sponsors listed in the program on your table. Thanks to Minuteman Press. Thank you to the Funding the Dream Planning Committee and all of the people here at the iHotel and Conference Center who are working so hard right now to make sure that we all have a great meal. I want to encourage everybody that tonight, already as we stand here tonight, we have already raised over $100,000 thanks to the generous giving of all of our partners who are here tonight. So a big round of applause for all of our partners. At this time, I would like to recognize the Lifeline Connect executive staff. Brenda Rogers, the administrative director. Randy Brown, director. D.L. Rogers, the Executive Director. Staff members of Lifeline-connect, Mark DePlacido, Assistant Director. Jamie Carls, Assistant Director. Jen Cook, Office Assistant. Please keep Jen in your thoughts and prayers. She could not be with us tonight. Carrie Hurd, who did the graphic design of the information that you're seeing here tonight in the packets. Tammy Roberts handles accounting. Les Cotton is on the Board of Directors member, and Troy Lands is an advisory board member. We're also pleased to have with us tonight several special guests who serve our community. Appellate Court Judge Robert Steigman, Presiding Judge and Drug Court Judge Randy Rosenbaum. We are thankful to have several law enforcement, fire department, and other first responders with us this evening. We have a table that is dedicated to the honor of the late Chris Oberheim, who served with the Champaign Police Department. Amber Oberheim planned on being here tonight but could not make it due to a funeral service of a family member. Amber has founded the Peacemaker Project, a support organization for law enforcement personnel and their families through community outreach, reform, and education. Please keep the Oberheims, Amber, and their family in your thoughts and prayers. Representing law enforcement, first responders tonight, from the Champaign County Sheriff, we have Dustin Herman, Urbana Chief of Police, Bryant Seraphim, Champaign Deputy Chief of Police, Nate Rath, Monticello Police Chief, John Carter, the Tolono Police Chief, John Brown, and the Rantoul Police Chief, Tony Brown. All in attendance. Retired Detective Sergeant of Champaign Police Department and Senior Investigator for the Champaign State's Attorney Office, Dave Griffith, is with us tonight. Also, we have several fire department representatives here. From the Urbana Fire Department, we have the Chief, Chuck Loss, Deputy Chief Kent Dade, and Lieutenant Roy Lane in attendance. We are thankful for all of our law enforcement, fire department, and first responders. Of all those people that I just read, please stand up right now along with your spouses and guests so that we can show appreciation. We would also like to recognize Illini legend and special guest, Sergio Mclean. Sergio is the founder, Sergio is the founder of Sergio Mclean and Associates, overseeing the Sergio Mclean basketball clinics, the Wayne Mclean Basketball Academy, and other community programs for youth. You know, I had the opportunity one time to play in a Gus Macker against Sergio and Frankie back in the day. It was downtown Peoria, you know, the high-rise up there. Those guys were a little bit well-known. And I had the pleasure of guarding Sergio, which is about like trying to guard the Incredible Hulk. He goes where he wants to go. And we held on for a second, but obviously we're no match for Sergio and his teammates. So, Sergio, great to have you here tonight. Thank you for joining us. Also joining Sergio as partners with another guest here tonight, Maurice Haynes from HV Neighborhood Transformation, a program dedicated to helping the youth of our community achieve success. Thank you, Sergio and Maurice, for attending here tonight. I'm very thankful for everyone present here tonight in the beautiful iHotel and joining via Facebook Live, courtesy of Taylor Construction and Design. All of you are appreciated, and we're thankful you're involved in the mission and cause of Lifeline-connect. As you heard Pastor Cotton speak, tonight's theme for Funding the Dream is This Is My Story. My story is 4 levels of how I came to know about recovery and addiction. My first real experience with recovery was in a book I read by Weldon Long called The Upside of Fear. Weldon is a well-known motivational speaker in the HVAC industry, and after seeing him at an industry event, I purchased this book. If you haven't read it, I highly encourage it. It's a true Horatio Alger story about defying all the odds, achieving success by overcoming adversity and addiction. My second level of experience was working with Drew Cook. Drew is a graduate of Lifeline-connect and works at Lands as the technical development advisor. As Drew and I got to know each other, we had many conversations about accountability and recovery. And I started to see some similarities between Drew and some of the other program guys that were hired at Lands and Weldon Long. Even though Drew and Weldon could not be more different as people, I saw their common approach to battling addiction and the importance of accountability. It's when a crazy idea kind of got in my head when I heard that Lifeline-connect was looking to raise the funds for a 24-person dorm. And what if we could get Weldon Long and the community to help Lifeline-connect accomplish the goal of building that 24-man dorm? And that's what we did. So, quick shout out to Wally Long and Habiger and Carrier, who sponsored that first event. My third level of experience was the preparation for that first year of the Lifeline-connect event. I got to really know the program and the program guys in our weekly meetings. I'll never forget when Randy Brown took us in the ditch. And what he meant by that was, when a program guy, when you take away drugs and alcohol, the ability to numb, you got fight or flight. And so when a guy runs, it's usually up to someone from Lifeline-connect to go after them. And oftentimes you end up in a ditch a mile or two down the road. So Randy took us there in that moment of what that felt like, to be in that ditch, helping him pull those people back into the program, as only Randy can do. What Randy described is what working with addicts is really like, overcoming the fear, the guilt, and the patterns of addiction. The fourth level of my story, I'm going to save until later in the program. So at this time, it is my pleasure to introduce the founders and executive staff of Lifeline-connect and my dear friends, Brenda Rogers, Randy Brown, and D.L. Rogers, here to share with you their stories.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. So this is my story. This is my why for Lifeline-connect in my life. 2 little 9-year-old twins walked into Sunday school back in 1995, and our daughter Renee, who a lot of you know, brought them into our home and into our family. And they got very close with us. The thing I didn't realize about them the entire time, I didn't realize that their father, stepfather, I should say, in the community we lived, which is Seidel, if anybody knows where that is. So I know there's people here that do. But anyway, their stepfather that they were being raised with was a crack addict, and their father was in prison for dealing drugs and using drugs. So didn't really realize that at the time. And the time came, it wasn't very long, they were going to move back to Kentucky. They were really sad to find they were going back. And Renee said, Mom, Dad, can we please have them stay all night? Can they just stay all night in our house? One night before they move. So they came in, they stayed all night. We treated them like preacher guests in our home, made them a nice room, did all that kind of stuff. Had a good time. I bought them a Bible. I gave them a Bible. And I wrote in the Bible, if you're ever in trouble, if you ever need us, call collect. Here's our phone number. And so they moved away. And before they moved, Joey made this statement. He said, when I'm 18, I want to come back. We were starting a church in Champaign, which we are there now, and he said, I want to help you and Pastor build the church. And they moved away. There was a few letters, a few collect calls, and then I really didn't hear from them for many, many years. And in 2004, my phone rang, and it wasn't collect, and it was them, and they were in Champaign. They were here to visit someone in the hospital. And long story short, at that point, Joey came to us and talked to us when they were here, and he said, I'm dealing with a marijuana addiction, and I really want to come back. I was 18 a week ago. Can I come? You're okay. Can I come back, and would you guys help me with an addiction? Oh, can you hear me better now? Oh, well, thank you, Sergio. I don't want to start over, but anyway, at 18, he came back into our lives and wanted help with a marijuana addiction. And my husband, being the wise person he was, put a couple things on him that he had to prove himself, working on a GED, some things like that. But we did bring him back up here, and I never had sons, had two wonderful daughters, but I never had sons. So there's a little void there, and Joey just kind of walked into that void like a son. But loving an addict, any of you that have this in your life, I walked that story of loving someone that had an addiction that became a heroin addiction. And it took my life. It just took my life trying to live a day before him, trying to keep him from trouble, trying to keep him out of jail, all kinds of things. At the worst point, it was living in a park in this city and wanting help and wanting us to take him, get him to a hotel, bring him to the house. At that point, it was just too much. We knew he had to have a safe place, he had to have help. And a friend told us about a faith-based recovery program in California. So we sent a Kentucky hillbilly to Los Angeles, California, and that was a shock to his system. And then it wasn't too much longer. Randy Brown had been working with people for years along this, and he had a friend, GP, that we also sent to California. So now Randy and myself and David are thinking about a dream. Could we do this in Champaign-Urbana? Could we have a residential recovery center here? I gotta look at my notes here. And so what happened at that point, we went to California and we visited the program. And visited Joey there, learned about the program, went to Missouri, one of the best faith-based recovery programs there, went to Arkansas, visited one there, and one in Illinois. And so together we kind of brought all of those things that we learned that were working, and the dream became true, and that was in 2006. We built a little 8-man facility in a building there. Later on, I do want to add that Jeffrey had a meth addiction, and he ended up coming in 2008, and he also came to Lifeline. Joey and GP, they'll argue which one was first, right, Randy? But they both came from California. We had the program ready, and they came here, and they were our first 2 residents. But my story continues and my passion grows. One of the things that God has made me able to do is help moms, dads, family members with codependency, because that's what I walk through. And so I do teach now along lines how to love an addict and not enable them. And so that's my passion, and thank you. And tonight you're going to see what the Lord's done. But that was my story. Thank you.
Appreciate everybody coming tonight. Number one, I want to thank Jamie Carls for letting me borrow his glasses. What partnership does that get him? Does he get some kind of partnership for that? Appreciate it. I'm notorious for forgetting my glasses. I was speaking at a wedding, and I actually had to have somebody bring me Jamie's glasses from the audience one time, so this is not new to him. But anyway, so grateful. that everybody's here tonight, and can't tell you what it means to us to be in a room with people that care about what God's called us to do. And I hope that you can consider yourself called at the same time, because all these stories are going to blend together. And I had not heard Brenda give her story in the form that it was given tonight. And then I noticed there's part of my story and her story and her story and my story. So anyway, this is my story. This is how part of how I ended up doing what God has me do in Lifeline-connect. I was about 3 years old when we moved to this area. I was raised on a quarter-horse farm out by Mahomet. My mom worked at the University of Illinois. My biological father was the vice president of a local bank. And you know, I admit life was good on the farm when I was a kid. I loved being out on the farm. I did a lot of chores, learned how to bale hay, learned how to work hard, spent a lot of times in the woods hunting and going down to the creeks and fishing and stuff like that. So life was good on the farm. So that was all good. But as time went by, things started to digress a little bit as my dad started to slip into addiction. So the interesting thing was, prior to that, like when I was probably 8 or 10 years old, I found this out much later. We had a guy in our hometown in Mahomet. We had like one drug dealer that everybody was aware of that pumped gas at the gas station. You got to remember, this is like a long time ago. And so he would sell drugs kind of on the side while he was working at the gas station. And this is how adamant my dad was about this. My biological dad, Lloyd, he went down to the gas station. He hunted this guy up, and he said, "Al, I want to talk to you." And Al said, "Okay, Mr. Brown." He took him aside. He said, "If you ever, and I mean ever, offer drugs to my kids, I will kill you." And if you ever knew my biological father and you had him say that to you, it would send chills down your spine, because you would take one look at him and know that was going to happen. So I never did get drugs offered to me by Al. So I guess it was pretty effective. But, you know, I'm going to keep fast-forwarding the tape. Is that better or worse? Better, okay. I heard it really close. So, I guess you guys can adjust that if you need to. So, I'm just kind of keep fast-forwarding the tape. So, years go by, and of course, my dad is a vice president of a bank. He's a businessman. He's successful financially. We race quarter horses and all this other stuff. And as time goes on, he becomes more and more absent at the farm, is not there as much. He will be gone for months at a time, very unfaithful to my family, very unfaithful to my mother, and just gone for long periods of time. And just one day, my mom, I got up earlier every morning and did chores like before the bus came. So I'd start at like 6 o'clock in the morning doing chores when I was very young. One day, my mom turned off my alarm, did my chores for me, and then she said, "Hey, look, I'm going to take you to school today." So I can remember this like it was yesterday. And she took me to school, and which is really weird because I was used to a 1-hour bus ride, you know. And so she was late for work, taking me to school. On the way to school, she said, "Hey, look, you just need to know that your dad's moving us off the farm and divorcing me, and so we're not going to be together anymore." So that was Friday. On Monday, I woke up in a different house and went to school from a different house. So then I started really noticing the transitions, because I would go out to the farm. My biological dad had bought an old car. I was like 12, 13 years old, and I used to drive that out to the farm about 5 miles away. And so I would go out there from time to time. So then what I started seeing was this guy that had hunted down the local drug dealer and threatened to kill him if he ever offered me drugs. I remember Troy walking into the kitchen, the dining room kitchen area, and seeing the breakfast table that my family used to eat breakfast at all the time, and the table was covered in drugs. Just covered in drugs. Big bags that were being split up into smaller bags, and just drugs all over the table. And I'm like, okay, you know, I'm just trying to absorb all that. And then the experiences that I had with Lloyd taking me out and getting me drunk and partying and exposing me to different things. And it was just such a contrast. I mean, it's just a contrast, but that's what drugs will do to somebody. Drugs can take somebody that's pretty moral and has some values and different things like that and take them to the place where they start doing things they never thought they would do. And so I was going off to college, and I'm just talking about these contrasts. And I remember going off to college at SIU, and I can remember my mom kind of sending me off nervously, like making sure I had all my jammies packed and whatever you do when you're a nervous mom. I'm going off to college, all the embarrassing things. And I remember her wanting me to have a good send-off and all this other stuff. Then I remember my dad saying, okay, I want to see you before you take off for school. And I thought, okay. So I went and I met him somewhere, and he said, well, you know, best wishes, blah, blah, blah. And this has just never left me. And he reached into his pocket, and he pulled out a big bag of speed, and he said, hey, I want you to have this. If you ever have any trouble staying up and studying, this will help. So that was my contribution from my father for college. Here, I always want to help you out in college, son. These will help you stay awake. Big old bag of Black Beauties. And so this is, again, the same guy that hunted down the drug dealer and said, I'll kill you if I ever offer drugs to my kids, ended up being the guy that was giving me drugs to go to school with. So much later, I came back to Champaign. I started working in a sporting goods store and was partying a lot and doing a lot of crazy things that I won't talk about with my mom here. But involved in a lot of different things. And this is maybe just a hair graphic, but it's just important to me to tell this because it's part of my story. It's like, again, I want you to think about how drugs and alcohol will take you places where you never thought you would go. You know? Not necessarily just like what we might think of as bad people, but good people that just get led down a wrong path. You know, I never really asked my dad to hand me a bag of speed when I went to college. You know? So I remember, does anybody remember a restaurant / in the evening was a bar called the White Horse? All right. I feel like I'm at home now. So I was in the White Horse, and I was in my mid to early 20s. And I was in White Horse, and I was with a bunch of my friends. And it was early in the evening, like 5:30 or 6 in the evening. So that was more like people would go in there and eat, maybe even take their families in there to have one of those Swiss and mushroom hamburgers that they had. And they take their families in. So it was like a real light atmosphere. But it was early in the evening, and I had been drinking heavily already with my friends. And so this is so vivid to me. I could tell you what shirt I had on and what jeans I had on, what boots I had on. So I'm sitting there, and I had drank way too much. And we're all sitting at this table, and I vomited on the table and passed out face first in my own vomit. And I'll never forget this. I kind of came to, and I raised up and I looked, and there was a man and his family sitting at a table. He had his 2 kids, like again, it's dinner hour. His wife and his 2 kids sitting at a table, a round table just about 10 feet away from us. And he's like looking at me, and he's like kind of looking at his family, and he's just like threatened by it. He doesn't want his kids to see that. He's appalled by it. He's disgusted by it. And he's trying to get his family out of there before they're exposed to it. And I mean, that went through me. That went through me. I never thought I would be in that position. I got up. I finally gathered myself, and I got up from that chair, and I walked down to that little downstairs bathroom that they had there. And I walked down there, and I kind of gathered myself, and I washed my face off. And I can remember looking at myself in the mirror and seeing the guy that was standing there. And I'm like, that's not me. That's not me. I'm not the guy that just did that. That's not me. And I had so much disgust for the fact that really was who I was right then, that I reared my head back and I smashed my face against that mirror and broke it into 1,000 pieces. And I stood there and I said, I'm done. And I went home that night. They got me home that night. The next morning I got up. I was going to mow the grass. And I went to the refrigerator to get a beer out of the refrigerator to go mow my grass. It was like 10 o'clock in the morning. And I remember standing up by the burn barrel, getting ready to get on the mower. And I went, tsh. And when I heard, tsh, I remember saying, I'm done. I'm done. And I poured that beer out. And I went in the refrigerator and I poured all the rest of the alcohol out of that refrigerator. And that was in like 1988, and I've never had a drink since then. I wouldn't consider myself an alcoholic. I didn't necessarily consider myself, for sure not a drug addict, but was so wrapped up and lost in those behaviors. But so what happened then is a year or so later, I got really involved in church, gave my life to God. My family was involved in church, and so I started reaching out to men that I had known as a boy. And so I had reached out, just three that come to mind. One of them was a crack addict, and one of them was a drug addict and majorly an alcoholic, and the other one was a heroin addict. And there were many others, but these are the three guys that I went to a grade school with that I'm talking about. So reached out to these guys, tried to help them every way possible. I mean, dedicated a huge chunk of my life to trying to make these guys okay. And without the residential component, and without the structure, and without the knowledge, and without the things that we know now, it was so stinking frustrating. It was so frustrating wanting somebody to get bad so much, and I couldn't help them. I had two of them live at our house, trying to help them to no avail. And I'm talking about over the course of years with zero success. And they had a desire to get better, and I had a desire to help them, but we couldn't make it happen. Out of those three guys, one of them moved away and relapsed into crack cocaine and moved away. The other one they found dead in a hotel room, and I ended up preaching his funeral. And the other one is the other one that Brenda Rogers talked about, came to Lifeline-connect. His dad called me, and his dad didn't have a whole lot of money. His dad, the heroin addicts guy, his dad called me. He said, hey, look, I know that you've always wanted to have a place where men could stay while you're helping them. I want to give you something. And I think he met me and David Rogers down at the church, if I'm not mistaken, and he handed us this like tattered manila envelope that had all kinds of different denominations of bills, and it had $10,000 in it. And he handed that to us, and we built that little dormitory that we had for years and years and years, where we housed about 5 or 6 guys. And so it's continued to grow. We're seeing men come from locally across the United States, and I'm so glad we're not doing it the way we were doing it then. Because when we started out, I don't know how any of them got clean. I look back at that, I said, I think I almost started using again trying to do it that way. That was probably the closest I've come to a relapse, just trying to get it off the ground, doing it the way we were doing it. But it's come so far because God's led it, and God's directed it, and God's continued to bring resources into what He's doing. And it's in knowledge, and it's in helps, and it's in funds, and a lot of different things. People that have pooled resources of help and prayer and everything else to make it what it is today. And I'm so grateful for it. But this is the thing that's so cool to me, is that I can't tell my story without telling our story. And I hear it in Brenda's, and I know I'll probably hear some in David's, and I hear it in Bill's. And what God is doing here is amazing. What God is doing here is absolutely amazing. And we all have an opportunity to make it a part of our story. So I thank you for coming tonight, and just appreciate all those that have helped. I appreciate you guys have taken an evening to spend with us, and I don't take that for granted, and I just want to thank you very much. Thank you for coming.
Oh, we're having a good time. Turn to your neighbor and say, we're having a good time. Thank you. We're honored that you're here, you're involved, and you support Lifeline-Connect. You're hearing the why and the purpose of Lifeline-Connect and how it began. And we operate on the theme of there's no such thing as a lost cause. And that's pretty much based on a teaching found in the Scripture when Jesus asked the question of us, who is our neighbor? Who is it that we should show kindness to or care for? And he gives this example of a man who is mugged, and he's beaten, he's robbed, he's stripped of his clothing, and he's left in a ditch, suffering, half dead. Some pass by, and they turn the other way, and they don't help the man. Others come by, they see the man's condition, they don't help, they just pass by. And I've heard different interpretations of this parable, this record, that the reason they passed by without offering help was because they didn't care, or because they were prejudiced and they were the other people or those people, or they thought it was too much trouble or too much effort, or they thought that those people deserved what they got because of the way they were living. And I'm not sure that any of those were the case. Maybe, just for our consideration, maybe they just didn't know how to care for someone in that condition. And maybe they just didn't know how to offer assistance to someone in such a condition. And then the record says a man came along, he offered assistance to the man in the ditch. And I kind of visualize this as the guy who was not afraid to cross the street, to get down in the ditch with him, get his hands involved with his injuries, a first responder for sure, and a man who was not afraid to get involved in this man's life. He had antiseptic with him. He had triple antibiotic ointment with him. He had bandages with him. But most of all, he had compassion on him. He came to where the poor guy was. He bound up his wounds. And then he did the most unusual. He picked him up and took him to Lifeline-Connect Residential Recovery Center. And he laid down some money at the end, and he said, I want you to take care of this man, and I'll come back to check on him. That's the aftercare program. And he left, and he went back to find another. And I can't explain it any better than that. That's what we do at Lifeline-Connect. We're not afraid to cross the street. We're not afraid to get involved with those people. Everybody all right here? And so our experience is that, as has been mentioned, we tried working with people and helping people in our backyard RVs and our garages. And our experience was telling us that there's a better method of care. And so we thought to establish the faith-based residential recovery center. And Brenda and Randy and I visited some of the other recovery centers, as Brenda mentioned. And I remember in particular, in Arkansas, after we visited the program, we're sitting in a restaurant, and we're eating tacos, and we're asking each other questions. Well, where could we do this? Or how could we do this? How can we fund this? How can we staff this? How could we do this? And I'm sure they'll remember, because there was an unusual pause. And instead of continuing on with eating our tacos, we were all sitting there with tears streaming down our face. And the whole atmosphere pivoted, and the question evolved to, how could we not? How could we not? When the three of us had experienced the grace and mercy of God in our own lives, when the three of us had all been given another chance, and when the three of us all had people who had invested in our lives, how could we not? And that's what I want to project to us tonight when we think about our community and what's going on in our community and what's going on in the youth in our community. How could we not? How can we not cross the street, get out of our comfort zone, do the unusual, and get involved in rescuing someone who, for whatever reason, ended up in the ditch? Thank you for being here tonight. I'm looking so forward to our keynote speaker, Tim Sinclair, and I hope that you're having a blessed time as well. God bless you.
Thank you, Brenda, Randy, and DL, for sharing your story. Next up to share his story about why he is involved in Lifeline-connect, president of Lands, Inc., the presenting partner for tonight's event, and someone who I feel has been a great job as a quiet leader in helping really bring the business community to Lifeline-connect, Mr. Troy Lance.
Thanks, Bill. I, too, would like to thank everyone for coming tonight. You know, there's a lot of things going on and life is busy, but we really do appreciate you taking time to come out and listen to our story. So my story began at the end of 2014. Randy Brown, who I'd never met before, called my service manager and said, "We have a graduate that I think you guys need to look at hiring." Well, I didn't know who Randy Brown was, but his daughter-in-law at the time, Kaylin, was working for me. So I felt obligated to at least have an interview. And, you know, my first experience with Randy Brown was one day I'm in my office, and I hear this Holly rumbling in. And I look out my window, and I see his daughter-in-law, Kaylin, come out, talk to him a little bit, give a hug, boom, gone again. That was my first experience with Randy. I didn't even know who he was. So we agreed to have the meeting and have the interview. And at the time, I was using, and still do, use Eric Kraft as a business coach. He has a 3-interview process that is, if anybody's been through it, most of the time when I'm in it, I'm glad it's not me, it's somebody else. Because I'm not sure where he's coming from half the time or how to answer these questions. So I figured we'll get Eric Kraft involved, we'll get Drew Cook in, I'll do my 3-interview process and move on. You see, in the past, before I started my own company, I was working for a company in Bloomington, Illinois, and the owner of that company decided to give someone a chance. And every time we thought things were going well, something would happen. He would steal money out of the checkbooks. He would go Saturday to a supply house, buy a bunch of refrigerant, and fence it. He lost his tools, and I was sick and tired of being involved with things like that. This doesn't work. I want nothing to do with it. So we bring Drew in for the first interview, and obviously we hired him at the end of 2014. So those of you that work for me, come up, please. And your wives. Not letting this out of this. And come on up. Yeah, good. Don't be shy, Michael. We know you better than that. So what I want to do tonight is highlight these guys and explain to you a little bit, you know, where they started and how they've ended up in the company. So as I mentioned, Drew Cook was the first one that we hired in December of 2014. And as we already mentioned, his wife Jen is under the weather and can't make it tonight. But so Drew started out working for me as an HVAC technician. He was from the Myrtle Beach area and had experience in that area, in that field. So Drew came in 2014, and he worked his way up through the company. And as Bill already mentioned tonight, that he's our technical development advisor, and he's developed programs to take someone fresh off the street. That was not literally off the street, and bring him through a series of testing and programs over about 5 years to make him a service technician. He's on the ministry team of the church. He's married to his wife, Jen, and they have 2 daughters. Our next hire was Joey. Where are you at, Joey? Right here. Joey was hired, let's see, in January of 2017. He started out working in the HVAC new construction and is currently there. He's ran several apartment projects for us. And one of the most awesome things, and I think you'll be hearing more from him tonight, he remarried his ex-wife, Autumn. Is that a miracle or what? That's amazing. Then our next hire was Matt Savage. We hired him in May of 2017. Matt and his wife, Miranda. He started out in the HVAC new construction department, worked there for 3 years, and then he moved inside to work in our parts room and straighten that out and develop processes to make that streamlined. And he's currently working as a service dispatcher, and they have 2 girls and a boy. So we kind of like the Savage family a little bit. He kind of paved the way. So he then hired his brother, Michael. Where are you at? There you go, on that end down there. Yeah, well, that's another story. But anyway, Michael is an HVAC residential comfort consultant. He started out there, never sold legal before. Before he kind of had a bait and switch deal going. And Michael has done a great job in home sales, and he's crushed quite a few monthly sales records over the time he's been there. He's also on the ministry team at Frapp Cycle Life, and he's married his wife, Megan, and they have 3 kids, 2 girls and a boy. Next, we hired Brett Bixman, who was feeling a little bit under the weather tonight, so he stayed home. We hired him April of 2018. He started in the plumbing new construction division, and he's currently a service plumber. So if you guys have any plumbing needs out there, he may show up. And he also served for 2 years as a resident dorm supervisor, yes, after he graduated the program. Then last but certainly not least, we hired James Gregory in December of 19. Let's see, what is James? Oh, he started out as an office assistant, and then he is currently in the dispatcher role. And he married his wife, Brittany, on July 17th. And yes, he remembered because I asked him. In front of Brittany, too, to be sure. I put him on the spot. All right. Then, the gentleman on the end is Wes Taylor. He was working for me, but he left on his own. To work his own. But I thought I wanted to bring him up to talk a little bit about it because it's really a cool story. So, we hired Wes. Wes worked for us from April 2015 to May of 2019. And he worked in the HVAC new construction division. After graduating the program, he married his wife, Kendra. They have 2 children, a girl and a boy, associate pastor at his church in Sidell. And the part that I think is really cool is Wes went out and and his wife started Taylor Construction Design. And since that time that he left in May of 2019, they built 30 new homes. So as you can see, there's quite a few similarities in these guys' stories, and I wish they had time to tell them all. They have incredible stories, and I get them out of them from time to time. It's like wow, it just blows my mind. Some of the things they do, and some of them are kind of funny now, but at the time they weren't. You know, so they all had the things they had in common. They all had a drug addiction of some type. They came to the program with hopelessness, which a lot of times leads to suicidal thoughts and tendencies. They ruin relationships with their families or friends, and in some cases, spouses and children. You know, they tell you the stories of going to a birthday party, and they go into the room where everybody put their coats and purses at, and they go in there and they steal everything that's in there because they're looking for their next high. They would use anybody and anything to get money to buy drugs. And as we heard earlier, they're a burden on society and the taxpayers. You know, then they came Lifeline-connect. The Lifeline breathed new hope into these men. You know, the cycle of drug abuse for those families is over. The families are put back together. They're a help to society, not a drain. And the other thing that amazes me is some of these men were married before they came in the program, and those wives stuck with them. It just blows my mind that they had enough in them to walk through that with them. This program is not easy. It's not for the faint of heart. They will take you down to where you need to be. They come to find the root problem and then build you back up and give you the tools to cope. And then even after they graduate the program, there's accountability pieces put in place so that they can stay on the right track. You know, these guys have had gainful employment. Each one of these guys, from where they started to where they're at now, have moved up. They've not just got a job and doing the minimal to get a paycheck to pay for their bills. So I think that's really, really says a lot. You know, the current program, guys, you want to stand up, please? Those that are here that are in program now. Look at the... I want to commend you on your courage for entering the program, and take a look at the success stories on this platform, as well as those that are at the tables. And this is your goal. This one day can and will be you as well. And I'm just, in closing, I'm asking each one of you to help partner to keep this amazing program going, to change lives, and help put families back together and men back in their relationships, and have amazing success stories continued. And as it's been said several times tonight, there is no such thing as a lost cause, and there's proof right here. Thank you.
You know, having worked with all of those guys, I can tell you that they're not just great employees and they show up and they're grateful. They've got a job, as Troy mentioned. They're culture guys. They're guys you want to be in the foxhole with every day. They're guys, when you know, HVAC is 24/7, it's 365. It's hard work, it's long hours. And to be in the foxhole with guys like this who have been rebuilt from the ground up, you know, again, we felt like we were doing something for them, but at Lands, we were the beneficiary. We received the benefit of them helping rebuild a culture. And again, with the leadership of Troy and Kathleen Lands, you can see why that's been a successful program. So Troy, Kathleen, thank you for all you do as being our premier partners tonight. As you will see throughout the rest of tonight's program, addiction does not just affect the addict, but the entire family. Parents, siblings, wives, and children are all deeply affected. Let's have a look at all of the children who got their fathers and families restored through Lifeline-connect and faith in Him. At this time, it is my pleasure to welcome to the stage Margaret Goldsmith, a faithful Lifeline-connect supporter.
I haven't been here in 2 years. Did you have a dinner last year? I'm so happy to be back. I really am. I've missed you guys, even the ones I don't know yet. So I'm reading a scripture, and I'm going to refer back to it during my discussion, my remarks tonight. Call heaven and earth to record this day against you that I have set before you life and death. Blessing and cursing, therefore choose life, that both thou and thy seed may live. I have referred to my daughter many times when I've spoken here before, but I grew up in addiction. My dad was an alcoholic, and a lot of you don't know that. When you go to the doctor and you fill out all the forms and they ask if your parents are still alive, and if they're not, they ask why he or she died. So I filled this out one day, and my dad has been dead for many years, and they wanted to know what he died of, and I said stupidity. And I started filling that out every time, and I thought, I know I'm snarky. I know. I can't help myself, Randy. But that's how I felt. It was stupidity. And I won't go into all those reasons why I picked that word. But finally, after years and years and years, one doctor said, why do you have stupidity down here? And I said, because he was an alcoholic. Okay. So, next came my daughter. And my daughter was in her sophomore year of college at Indiana University, and she called me on Little Five weekend. Nobody calls their mother on Little Five weekend. Nobody. And she said, Mom, my leg hurts. I'm in horrible pain. I don't know what I'm going to do. Go to the hospital. I will not go through all that. Fast forward, she ended up at the hospital in Indianapolis, and she had a horrible infection in her knee. Well, that turned out not to be the case. So 2 surgeries later, months and months, 9 knee taps later, you can't imagine what came out of this knee. She has prescription drugs, she's been on IVs, you know the story. And all of a sudden I find myself with a daughter who had to drop out of college because she had psoriatic or reactive arthritis. She didn't have an infection in her knee. And that went on forever. So now the prescription drugs are flowing, the IVs have been flowing in and out of the hospital, and I have an addicted daughter on my hands. How did this happen? So Jenna Brown, Hauk, I said, you need to talk to my dad. And she kind of knew what was going on. I was in D.C. at the time. So I called Randy, talked to him for 2 minutes, and he said, who's the addict in the family? And I thought, oh my gosh, because I didn't say she was an addict. And we decided he was going to come out and do stage and intervention. So Randy shows up on his motorcycle. He drives from Illinois to Washington, D.C., scares the you-know-what out of my neighbors, and here's this guy on the Harley, and he comes in, and 2 days later, we decide, my husband, my daughter, and myself, absolutely she's going to go to rehab. She goes to California, she gets into rehab, and miraculously, even without a program like this, she does very well. And years later, she has her own business. She started a sober living house out there for women. She meets this great guy, they split up, but now they're married. And she's got a 2-year-old, my grandson, who's the best child in the whole world. Sorry, guys. So I have been involved in addiction my entire life. And then during this time with Randy, I get to know the guys, a lot of the guys. And some of you are here tonight. And I remember meeting Michael Savage, and then I saw him a year later, and I thought, wow, how'd he get rid of all those tattoos? But Michael didn't have tattoos, did he? There you are. Seriously, I thought you had tattoos everywhere, and then I see you a year later, and I can't believe I'm looking at the same guy. So, and that started a 9-year adventure, and I call it an adventure, with Lifeline-connect. Today happens to be the 9th anniversary of my daughter's. 9 years she's been clean. 9 years. Yeah. And while she didn't come to a program like Lifeline-connect, she started with that man right over there. And so I will refer back to this scripture. If I can find it again. Maybe I can't find it again. But I just want to say she chose life. And the thing about Lifeline-connect is that you are reminded, I am reminded, every single day you have a choice, and you continue to choose life. And it's presented to you in such a different way. Choose life. Are you crying, Randy? No. Okay. I don't get through this without crying because I'm talking about my daughter. So the scripture talks about choose life so you can live and thy seed can live. And you stole a little bit of my thunder here because you showed the picture. It's not just your seed, your children, your grandchildren, but it is what you plant. It is seed, plant, harvest. Look at this harvest. Look at what you've planted. So that's my story. And, I'll probably be here another 9 years, I hope. And you know what the best part of my night was? I got to see Autumn and Joey together. It just thrilled my heart to see. It's true. I've heard so much about Autumn. And then when I heard you got remarried and those beautiful children, oh my goodness. So I can't say enough about this program. And I can't say enough about the Rogers, all you guys. Who are the new guys? You got to stand up again. You got to stand up again. Because and I say this to all the new guys. You guys look so good tonight. I've not met you guys. They're all cleaned up. Nice coats, nice haircuts. I want you to remember one thing. Everybody in this program loved you before you looked like that. They loved you when you were in the trenches. We loved you a long, long time ago. We've always loved you. And you have a lot of seeds to plant. You've got a harvest to bring in. And don't forget it, because if you do, Brenda and I will come after you. Thank you very much.
This is my story.
This is my story.
This is my story.
This is my story.
This is my story. This is my story.
This is my story. I was once a homeless meth addict.
Before Lifeline, I was an alcoholic.
For over 25 years, I was addicted to amphetamines and opiates.
This is my story. I was addicted to heroin. I was a deadbeat drunk, meth user.
I was hopeless and depressed.
I was once a meth addict. I was a homeless addict on the street. I was completely bound by heroin addiction. I once was a cocaine addict.
Until I came to Lifeline-connect. Now I'm finding hope.
This is my story.
This is my story.
This is my story.
I come to Lifeline-connect. But then I came to Lifeline-connect. I came to Lifeline-connect.
I came to Lifeline-connect. Now I have peace and joy and hope for my future.
But after coming to Lifeline-connect, I now have meaningful relationships.
I came to Lifeline-connect, and now I'm becoming a better father.
But now I am a father and a husband again. And now I have peace.
And now I'm a productive member of society.
Shouldn't I have a relationship with myself? And now I'm a home owner.
But now I got my wife and my children back. And now I have my family back. And now I'm helping when guys come through Lifeline Community.
I'm a family man now. I have a job, and now I'm married.
I'm a pastor. I have a beautiful wife and 3 wonderful children.
Now I'm a man of integrity. I'm a mentor to those in recovery. I've been clean and sober for 3 years.
I came to Lifeline-connect. Now I have self-respect and the respect of others. Now I'm an addictions counselor.
I was once lost, and now I'm found.
This Is My Story video was produced by Lifeline-connect graduate and current Assistant Director Mark DePlacido and Magnify Film and Media. Great job on that, Mark. Time now for the stories and testimonies of Lifeline-connect graduates, program men, and family members. I am pleased to welcome to the stage Jamie Carls, current Assistant Director and graduate of Lifeline-connect, Joey Trujillo, current current Lands employee and graduate of Lifeline-connect, Dylan Leonard, current Lifeline-connect resident, and Megan Savage. Megan is the wife of Lifeline-connect graduate and current comfort consultant for Lands, Michael Savage. Megan is also the owner of her own company, Megan Savage Photography, and she's doing double duty tonight. You see her around taking pictures, and she's going to give her testimony right now. We'll start out with Jamie Carls.
If the rest of the people that he mentioned would make their way up here, that'd be great. So my name is Jamie Carls, and this is my story. My drug of choice was alcohol. My story begins being brought up in a great Christian home. Close family. We'd have dinner at night, every night of the week. We go on family vacations. We go to church every week. No alcohol in my home, no drugs, nothing like that. Like I said, a great family. My parents, who are here tonight, and next month they'll be celebrating their 56th anniversary. So I tell you all this because addiction has no boundaries. You know, addiction doesn't just affect those who come from a broken home or who are less fortunate. It affects everyone. Also, alcoholism is a progressive disease, and what I mean by that is, for me, it started out. My family had an intervention on me. I think I was around 35 years old, and I went to my first rehab. I started going to AA meetings at that time and listened to people who had addiction problems. But I told myself I didn't have a problem. People talked about drinking in the morning to get rid of the shakes. I didn't do that. Losing their jobs, going on drinking binges for days, weeks at a time. I hadn't done that. I hadn't gone through that yet, but eventually I would. One of my lowest times was when I was drinking so much that I was having heart palpitations. I didn't sleep for days, and I finally had to call my boss at the time and to let her know I couldn't come into work and I was in trouble. The ambulance came and took me, and I spent about a week in the hospital. When I got to the hospital, my blood pressure was 205 over 150, and the doctor couldn't believe it, that I didn't have a heart attack or a stroke. My final round with my addiction came in the spring of 2016. I was going on a week-long drinking binges several times. I would go to family events, have the shakes, and be embarrassed, miserable, but I'd finally had enough. I came to Lifeline in March 26th of 2016, and my story started changing because I began to put the pen in God's hand. I said began to put the pen in God's hand because it's difficult for us addicts to give up control. And good story about that is when you are 6 months into the program, you're eligible to go to work and apply for a job. And so a lot of companies, or a couple companies in the area work with us, Menards and Lands, as you've seen. And at that time, Menards wasn't hiring. That's the first time ever that, since I've been here, that Menards wasn't hiring, you know. So I got an interview with Troy Lands, at Lands. And let me tell you, first of all, when you go to an interview at Lands, Troy kind of mentioned it here. I sat across the table from Troy, Eric Kraft, and Bill Yackel, scared to death, and tried to explain to them why I should come to work for them when I'm sitting in a rehab. So, but I got to tell you, I am the only guy in program, as far as I know, that went to 3 interviews with these guys and didn't get hired. But that is because God had great plans for my life. And see, and I talked about control because when I was told I was going to get the interview with Troy, you know, in my mind, here I go, started planning my life. You know, I'm going to graduate, work for Lands, great company, career, I'll stay here, and this is what my life is going to look like. But God had other plans. And God has given me hope and purpose again in my life. And now I'm doing His will in my life as one of the assistant directors of this program. I mean, I love what I do. I can't call it a job, you know. And I'm thankful for that today. So I have this great career now, love doing what I love to do. I have a beautiful wife who I adore and great relationships with my family again. So tonight I'm asking you to become part of our story by partnering with us to fight this cause, because as you've heard several times tonight, there's no such thing as a lost cause. Thank you.
My name is Joseph Trujillo, and this is my wife Autumn, and this is our story. 2015, actually I grew up in a town called Mendota, Illinois, which is up north, about 2 hours. And I came down here in 2015, broken, no hope, homeless, children, somebody else raising them, because I couldn't do it on my own. Neither of us could. At the time, when I got there, I started working on my life, and I wanted her to get in recovery with me because she was in addiction too. And while I was getting help at Lifeline-connect, she was still using back at her hometown. While I was fighting for my life, she was back at the hometown putting a needle in her arm because she didn't think she was good enough to be a wife to me and be a mother to our children. So she was trying to end her life. I mean, you're literally looking at 2 dope fiends that should have never did anything in life. But I'm so glad that we got introduced to Lifeline-Connect. I did 18 months in the program. And while I was doing 18 months in the program, what my wife's Lifeline-Connect was is she sold to an undercover cop and got 2 years in prison. And that's what saved her life, actually. And while I was fighting for my life in Lifeline-Connect and somebody else raising our children, she was in prison fighting for her life. And when I graduated in 2017, I got full custody of all 3 of my children. And I was raising them for about 2.5 years. And then Autumn got in recovery, and she started seeing our children. And she started doing amazing. And I started flourishing at Lands. And like Troy was saying, I'm a foreman, a job site foreman, and I'm so thankful for that. And in October, we got remarried. God blessed us. And actually next Sunday will be a year that we've been married. And November 13th will be 6 years that I've been sober and clean and living for Jesus. And January 3rd will be 5 years that I've been working for Lands Heating and Cooling, which is huge for me because I couldn't even hold a job when I was in my addiction. But me and my wife were fighters, we're survivors. The world looked at us and tossed us to the curb, and we stood back up and we looked them in the eye, and Lifeline-Connect gave me the tools to stand up. And you're looking at a survivor, you're looking at another survivor, and I am so glad, I'm so grateful for Lifeline-Connect because not only did it change my life, but I have a daughter that's 7 years old, her name is Lainey. I have another daughter that is 11 years old, her name is Liliana, and I got a son that's 13 years old, and his name is Gabriel. And they never had parents before I came to Lifeline-Connect. But now every night, me and my wife get to sit down and say a prayer with them and give them a kiss goodnight. And that wasn't even in the picture. There was no hope for them. But God had a different story for the Trujillo. Now what we call ourselves is Team Trujillo because we're overcomers, and I'm so glad what God has done for me, and that's our story.
Good evening. My name is Dylan. I'm a former resident at Lifeline-Connect. Sorry, can you hear me now? Yeah, okay. Before coming to program, I was a alcoholic, meth user. I started drinking at the age of 16. I was just in a very depressed stage. Felt lonely. Felt as a failure to the world, to my family, and I thought alcohol was the choice to cope with it, but I sure was wrong. But so I was running from this depression and stuff. I was drinking every day. I was drinking at school. It turned into drinking at work. I graduated high school, luckily. And I would drink at work. I would be drunk by 9 o'clock in the morning, and then it got worse and worse with just loneliness and feeling like a failure. I thought this could get better by putting myself in a relationship, and it was just very toxic for me, and it made it worse. I got worse in my addiction. When I turned 20, I was introduced to meth, and from this time, I was drinking every day until I would black out, and then I would smoke meth to stay up. I was staying up for weeks on ends, just drinking and smoking, because I was just so alone and just pushing people away. And I didn't want nobody to get close to me because I felt afraid down in. I felt afraid. I couldn't trust nobody, and it was hard to trust people. And in this, I found myself very alone, and I came up with the decision of taking my life. And I was just very, very sad and alone, and felt like no one needed me. My family didn't need me. I was a burden. And I decided to take my car and drive it into a creek, but luckily I didn't. I stayed on the banks, just was looking in that water. I was like, man, I can't do this no more. Luckily I did not. I'm still here, but my amazing aunt helped me get into a rehab, find Lifeline-connect while I was in a psych ward. And I was there. I was debating on whether to come to a rehab for a year. I'm 22 years old. If I wanted, I didn't know if I was sure if I wanted to commit a year to something. But I'm glad I did. I contacted Randy Brown while I was in the psych ward. Spoke with him. He accepted me. I'm grateful for that. And now I'm here. Lifeline has done an amazing job at making me a better man, allowing me to trust people, showing me that I can trust people, that I can allow people in. And I live with my brothers back there, and I just love them. And I thank everyone that supports Lifeline, and I thank all the staff, and I love you guys.
This is my story. Addiction had stolen and robbed everything in my life. A heroin addiction had consumed my life and left me with 3 felony convictions. I was homeless. I was living on the streets. I was begging people for money. My wife found me not once, not twice, but 3 times on the floor dead of a heroin overdose, which left me in the ICU on a ventilator for 9 days. This is my story.
You guys hear me? Oh, okay. My name is Megan Savage, and this is my story. It was a Sunday evening in the summer of 2010 when my friend came running up to me giggling, as young girls do, and asked me if I had noticed the 2 new guys sitting several rows back. And that's when I seen him, sitting there with the brightest smile on his face. And I was not brave enough to go introduce myself to him that evening, so before I knew it, church was over, and him and his friend were gone. And about a month and a half later, he randomly showed back up again. Moving on to a Friday evening in the fall of 2010, we were at an event together playing volleyball, and if you know me, that's when like my true self comes out. So I was really feeling motivated to go introduce myself to him finally. And so he responded back with that bright smile and said, "Hi, I'm Michael Savage." And so fast forward to January 1st of 2011, Mike and I were working together at a grocery store, which he got me the job at. And that day, he got brave, and it felt like a movie to me because I'm like that girl who's in love with romance and all that. And so it felt like a movie because the man of my dreams decided to tell me that he liked me. Moving on to August 28th of 2011, Michael Savage got down on one knee in front of hundreds of people and asked me to be his wife. And so on January 6th of 2012, I finally became Mrs. Megan Savage. Yes. Life was great. For 2.5 years, we were happily married. It was wonderful. And we even found out that we were pregnant with our first child in September of 2014. And then it happened. Mike relapsed in the fall of 2014. And my life went from almost perfect to what felt like complete tragedy. At 1 a.m. Saturday morning in late October, I found my husband on the floor, sweaty, pale, clenched fists, making choking noises I had never heard before, eyes closed, mouth half open, and I began shaking him, yelling his name, "Michael, Michael, wake up, wake up," but there was no response. He wasn't waking up. And so that was the very first overdose I had ever seen in my entire life. And little did I know there would be 4 more to come in the next 3.5 months. But wait, what? Because I didn't sign up for this life. I was the goody two-shoes in school, straight A's, all that kind of stuff. And so my life wasn't supposed to be affected by somebody with drug addiction. Because where in the world did this come from? What was happening to me? Why was I running around on a Monday evening wondering where my husband was? Why was I knocking on my assistant pastor's door that night, crying with tears in my eyes, saying, my husband's going to die tonight? Because I fully believe that to be the truth. Why was I at my 20-week ultrasound, where it was supposed to be happy and exciting, instead I was feeling sad and guilty because this sweet innocent baby on the screen had no idea what was going on and what I was getting ready to bring her into. So listen, I was thankful when my husband got put on a ventilator in the hospital for 9 days, which is kind of weird to say. Like, when have you ever heard anybody say they were thankful? But at that moment, I didn't have to wonder where he was. I didn't have to wonder, is he going to live through the night or is he going to die from a drug overdose? And that may sound like a little bit exaggerated to you, but I promise you it wasn't. That was my life. That's what I was going through every night. So for me, for him, the only answer was Lifeline-connect. Why? Because Michael Savage had already tried numerous rehabs. He tried the 14-day rehabs, the 30-day rehabs. He tried the ones that were just short. And what do you say, clean? Sure, for a week, maybe. But it was back to the normal after that. So what Mike needed was something lengthy, something long and in-depth, the kind that digs deep and adds God to it, the kind that doesn't just say, here's a prayer in 12 steps, I hope this helps you stay clean. And please don't think that I'm saying the 12 steps aren't good, because they are. They are good. But Mike just needed something deeper and something that was going to help with the root of the problem, because it's going to be very hard, if not impossible, to heal something, a deep-rooted problem, in 30 days. Mike wasn't going to come home to my apartment, I can tell you that, when he left the psych ward. So on March 4th, 2015, he entered Lifeline-connect. And now I have a husband that's been living in recovery for 6+ years. We have 3 beautiful children. We got our first home together about 2 years ago, bought our first home about 2 years ago. Now my husband has a job at Lands that allows me to stay home and take care of our kids and have my own business. So now I am very, very thankful for Lifeline-connect. I'm Megan Savage, and that's my story.
Carrie, I wonder if you could do one favor for me, please. Can you bring back that photo of Joey Trujillo? Look at his eyes. Can you bring back the photo of Jamie? Look at his eyes. And Michael. Do you have Michael Savage's? The point I'm trying to make is, look at the eyes hopeless, lost, desperate. And then look at the after photo. I often talked with a lot of the program guys at work, and I say, man, I don't know if I'd want to know that guy. I don't know if I knew that guy. They said you wouldn't want to know that guy, right? They've been transformed. Their lives have been changed from the ground up. Thank you, Carrie. We're just getting started, folks. Guys, our featured speaker tonight, Tim Sinclair, is a familiar voice to many Illini fans and sports fans throughout Illinois and Indiana. Tim has been the PA announcer for the Chicago Fire for 7 years, the Illinois Fighting Illini men's basketball team for 6 years, and the women's basketball team for 9 years. Tim is in his first season announcing for the Chicago Bears, my team, the Bears, and the Chicago Bulls. Tim is not new to the NBA family, as he spent 2 seasons with the Indiana Pacers, took the mic in both the NBA and WNBA bubbles last summer, and was selected to be the PA announcer for the 2020 NBA All-Star Game in Chicago, and is the voice of NBA Live. Throughout his career, Tim Sinclair has been selected to take the mic at the Big Ten men's basketball tournament in Indianapolis, 2019 Gold Cup Final, 2018 ESPN Champions Classic, and 2017 Major League Soccer All-Star Game. In addition to his PA announcer roles, he co-hosts a daily lifestyle television show called CI Living. Round of applause if you've seen him on CI Living. For CBS affiliate and current partner for Lifeline-connect WCIA. Tim has been involved in Lifeline-connect since year 1. He was our MC each and every year. And I'm sorry, it's a bit of a downgrade this year, going from Tim Sinclair to yours truly. But it's been amazing to get to know Tim and to have Tim be involved with the program each and every year and watch his career take off like a program graduate almost, right? Tim attended the University of Illinois, where he found his calling in radio, and has since held various PA announcer duties for the school since 2008. He currently resides in Mahomet, Illinois, and despite all of that acclaim, one of the telling stories to me is how my daughter Ava, who goes to school with Tim's son, you know, when she sees Tim, and I'm kind of like, man, that guy's a big deal. You know, he's on TV, he's on the Bears, he's on the Bulls, and she's like, no, that's Jeremiah's dad. Please welcome to the stage the voice of Illinois sports, Tim Sinclair. Thank you.
Somebody has been reading my website, so well done. It's entirely too long. I'm going to need to pare that down at some point. I will admit it is much weirder to be the introduced rather than the introducer. That's I like the introducer role, but now the pressure's on to actually perform, right? My job as a public address announcer is to literally be heard and not be seen. Most people know the voice, but they don't know what I look like. They don't know where I sit, and I have had on numerous occasions people say they thought I was a computer of some sort and that it wasn't even a real person. But I can assure you that when you go to Illinois basketball games and you hear, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to State Farm Center, that is a real person. It is me. It is my job. No computer required. What I do want to say tonight, though, beyond that, is thank you. When they first invited me to speak, I was a little concerned about what to say, but I was also concerned that people would show up, and that you did. So thank you very much for being here tonight. I appreciate it, and I certainly know the Lifeline-connect folks do as well. I come from a long line of puzzlers, which may be the most disappointing opening line I could have possibly offered you tonight. And I'm sorry, but just hang with me, and I promise I'm going somewhere. From when I was little, I remember doing puzzles with my grandparents. My dad's parents were big-time puzzlers. They, in their little living room outside Detroit, Michigan, they had this card table that was always set up, and there were always two folding chairs kind of right next to it, and a 500 or 1,000 piece puzzle laid out that was usually somewhere around halfway finished. And we would spend hours at this table just working on the puzzle. Well, I was 5. It was clearly beyond my ability to do much, but I would stand there and help my dad and my grandfather, and I would try piece after piece, and usually wouldn't get anything accomplished until my dad or my grandpa would hand me a piece and kind of point in the right direction, like, hey, try it over there. And eventually I would get one and be super excited. My mom's mom, same thing. She did puzzles all the time at their house. And then my sister and I, growing up with my parents, there was quite often a puzzle on our dining room table. Well, as luck or genetics would have it, the younger of my 2 boys, Elijah, who's 12 now, is a big-time puzzler. He loves doing puzzles. And in fact, just the other day, he said, Dad, I want to do a 500-piece puzzle as fast as we can. Let's get it done in a day. And then we're going to do a 1,000-piece puzzle, and then a 1,500, and then a 2,000. And then he was on Amazon looking for like 5,000-piece puzzles. I don't have the heart to tell them that he finds one, he's also going to have to buy us a dining room table because those things get really big really, really fast. But he loves these puzzles. My older, Jeremiah, who Bill referenced just a few minutes ago, is 14. He's not as big into the puzzle thing, but he likes to poke his head in the room and sort of see how Elijah and I are doing. And he started doing this thing where he will walk up to the table looking like he's really interested, and then with the offhand, he will slide one of the pieces off the table or out of the box and put it in his pocket. Little jerk. He's like, come on. There's nothing worse than putting together 999 pieces of a puzzle and getting to the end and like, I don't even have a dog. Like, the dog didn't eat it. I don't vacuum that often. It's not in the vacuum. It's like, where did this piece go? But that's his role. And then usually, he's very good about this, actually. He walks in the room later as we're getting near the end, and we're kind of freaking out, like we've counted how many pieces we have left, and we count how many holes are in the puzzle. We're like, oh, no, we're missing. And Jeremiah will walk in smiling, and he'll have the piece in his hand, and he'll set it on the table and give us the piece that we need. But that's the whole point of a puzzle, right? To end up with a completed picture. The journey's fun, but having a picture at the end is kind of why you're doing the puzzle in the first place. Growing up, I had this picture in my head of what my puzzle was going to look like. Junior high and high school, I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that I was going to be an architect. Might come as a bit of a surprise to some, but that's what I thought I was going to be. I studied with several architects. I would go sort of job shadow them. I would draw floor plans of my room and our house, and that's what I wanted to be, was an architect. In fact, in high school, I probably had 8 to 10 houses that I designed actually built. People hired a high school student to design their house. Foolish, I know, but it worked. I think it worked. As far as I know, all of them are still standing. I did hear at one point that maybe a back porch had fallen off of someone's house. But for our purposes tonight, that was the builder's fault, not the designer's fault, and we're just going to move from there. My plan was this, and I had one plan only. It was to go to architecture school, which I did at the University of Illinois, get my undergrad degree, get my master's degree, do the 3-year apprenticeship program, become an architect, eventually move to probably somewhere in Colorado and join a small to medium-sized architecture firm, design and build my own house, get married, have kids, have a dog, go on vacation all the time, right? All the things you think you're going to do when you're young. And, of course, retire early and live happily ever after. Well, if you're keeping track at home, I'm like 1 for 10 on that list. Then this is, 25 years later or more? I have kids. That's the one. All the rest, over, right? So I dropped out of college 3 semesters in to pursue a career in radio. So obviously all the architecture stuff went out the window with that. I did get married, but ultimately got divorced. Don't have a dog. Instead of a house in the mountains, I have a townhouse somewhere in the cornfields. Don't take vacations nearly as often as I thought I would, and at the moment, early retirement is not looking like a great possibility. So, I figured out very early in life what I wasn't going to be. That was the easy part, figuring out what I wasn't. But it took me a whole lot longer to figure out what I was going to be. In fact, that process started about 10 years ago, and I didn't even know it at the time. But in 2011, I was doing a morning radio show here locally and on a network of stations on WBGL with my good friend Pam. And we thought that when this story came across our computers, it would be a great story just to do for fun, for radio. And it was that the Chicago Cubs were looking for a new public address announcer. Now, I had done a very little bit of public address announcing for the University of Illinois. I was doing, I think, softball and swimming and diving. Yes, they need a PA guy for swimming and diving. But we thought it'd be fun to talk about, hey, you could be the next voice of Wrigley Field, and then I was going to do like the audition and submit it just kind of for fun for the radio bit. So I sat in my office, I recorded on an actual video camera the script they put on their website, and I sent it off. We talked about it on the air, and to me, that was it. Nothing else was going to come of that. Well, March 11th, 2011, I remember the date, I remember where I was at dinner, and my phone rang. And the guy on the other end said, "Hi, Tim, this is Joe Rios from the Chicago Cubs. How are you?" I said, "Hi, Joe, I'm great." He said, "As you might imagine, it's been very difficult whittling down the 3,000 submissions we had to our top 25 for the Chicago Cubs PA job." And I was expecting a thanks, but no thanks. And he said, "You're in the top 25. Do you want to come to Wrigley and do an in-person audition?" Well, it took me like a tenth of a second to go, yes, I would. I'll be there. And I was. 2 days later, I get to Wrigley Field, and I am just in awe. There are 24 other guys who are going for this job too, and I'm just happy to be in the building. I did the opening lineups for the Cubs versus the Pirates to a completely empty Wrigley Field. They had the organist playing behind us, and at the time they still just had the little video boards. They didn't have the big cool ones that they do now. But those were moving, and it was just an incredible experience. And I left feeling like just that. This was an incredible experience that I will never, ever get again, but dude, this was super fun. A couple of days later, my phone rings again, and this time it's Katie. She says, "Hi, this is Katie Margaret from the Chicago Cubs. How are you?" I said, "I'm fine." Said, "As you might imagine, it was difficult narrowing down our top 25 candidates to our final 4. And again, I'm very much expecting a thanks, but no thanks." And she says, "You're in it. Would you like to come back to Wrigley Field for a second audition?" If it's possible, I answered even faster that time than I did the first time. I'm like, "Yes, absolutely, I'll be there." And 2 days later, I was. But this time, they rolled out the red carpet. I walk into the clubhouse there at Wrigley, and the first person I meet who reaches out his hand is Ernie Banks. Now, from the noises you all made, you know who Ernie Banks is. In case you don't, Hall of Famer, Mr. Cub, passed away just recently. Super cool dude. And he said, "Congratulations, young man. How are you?" And I was like, I'm fine, I'm fine. And then he asked the question he asks all young people, and I guess to him at that point I was still a young person. He said, "Where'd you go to school, son?" And I said, "The University of Illinois." And he's like, "Oh, good school, good school." And I'm like, "Yeah, it is." I didn't tell them that 3 semesters in I dropped out. Our final 4 auditions. And again, I felt like I did well, didn't really expect much. The 30 days before that, I didn't even know the job existed, so I wasn't necessarily looking forward to it, just having fun. And they said, "We'll have an answer for you this afternoon." Great, okay. Well, 2 days later, and I still haven't gotten a phone call. Finally, my phone rings. It's, "Tim, this is Joe Rios from the Chicago Cubs. How are you?" "Great, Joe. As you might imagine," this is starting to sound familiar, "it has been very difficult whittling down our top 4 into figuring out who ultimately is going to be the new PA voice of the Chicago Cubs. And we have selected Andrew Bellison." Well, my name's not Andrew Bellison, so I was very disappointed by that. He said, "But you got second place." Okay, that's great, except, you know, the guy who gets second place is sitting in the exact same seat as the guy who got 3,000th place in the contest, which is at home on their couch during all the home games. So I felt I was good. I mean, I'm glad I got that, but I still felt let down that I didn't have the job, and like I had failed a little bit, despite the fact that I didn't even realize that PA as a full-time job was a thing. So The other thing, though, I started to realize then was maybe, just maybe, I am good enough to do this someday. This was kind of the, my picture wasn't at all clear, but there were some blurry patches of what if. Maybe dropping out of architecture school and jumping into a full-time career in radio wasn't a bad decision or wasn't something rash that I decided to do. Maybe it was the beginning of something that I had no idea was coming. I also appreciate with puzzles, beyond the fact that they create a picture, is that with puzzles, persistence pays off. There's this law in physics called entropy, and if you forgot most of 8th grade science class like I did, I will explain very briefly what entropy is. Essentially, it's the idea that everything in the universe tends toward disorder. So if you leave something alone long enough, it gets dirtier, it gets messier, it gets less organized, it gets fill in the blank. It doesn't get better, it gets worse. Oh, well, my best sort of example of that, I think, would be Christmas lights. Anybody understand? I, every year, lovingly pack those lights back into the original packaging. I use the twisty ties that come with them. I put them in the tote, and I put them in the climate-controlled basement. I do not touch them for 10 months. And when I pull those out of there in November, they are hopelessly tangled. It's entropy, or gremlins or something. It's the fact. And then after you spend 2 hours untangling them and you plug them in, they don't work anyway, and you got to go get new lights. So it doesn't really matter. For our purposes tonight, though, entropy is the idea that the pieces of a puzzle in a box aren't going to put themselves together. You can't just shake a box, open the box, and all of a sudden you're going to have a completed puzzle. And the same is true with our lives. We can't just expect things to happen without putting a little work in. And you're going to put exactly 0 puzzles together if you quit after the first failure. Right? Like you go to put a piece in, and then all of a sudden it doesn't work. You're like, well, I'm done. That's not how puzzles work. Not how life works either. You got to keep trying. Failure is a thing. And the one thing that most successful people have in common is the fact that they've failed more than anyone else. In 2017, so this is 6.5 years after my audition with the Chicago Cubs, I see the very first public address opening for a major sports team in that amount of time. These jobs do not come open often. Most people, when they have them, are there for years, if not decades. And so in 2017, I saw the Indiana Pacers were looking for a new PA guy, and I went, that's my job. I had been persevering. I'd been working all sorts of events. I'd given up time with my kids and with my friends, and I'd given up a whole heck of a lot of sleep because I was still doing morning radio at the time to get myself in a position for that job. And so it was a similar contest, film a video of you doing the audition, and then upload it to YouTube. But this time, I wanted to look the part, right? So I scoured the house looking for Indiana Pacers gear. The one piece that I found was a long-sleeve T-shirt that was a youth extra large. I was going to explain that I'm not a youth extra large, but you apparently already figured that out. I poured myself into this T-shirt. The sleeves were like mid-arm, and not because I'd pushed them up, just because that was as far as they would go. And I sucked all the air in, I turned the camera on, and I did the audition. Well, several weeks later, despite the ridiculous outfit, my phone rings. Hi, Tim. Dean Hevelin from the Indiana Pacers. How are you? Hi, Dean. I'm well. As you might imagine, it was very difficult narrowing down the hundreds of applicants we got to our final 15, but you're in it. Would you like to come to Bankers Life Fieldhouse for an audition? Yes, absolutely, I'll be there. And a few days later, I was. This time, it wasn't quite the red carpet treatment that I'd received at the Cubs. They barely turned the lights on inside Bankers Life Fieldhouse. There was a concrete floor. The basketball floor wasn't even down, and there was literally a folding table out in the middle of the floor with a folding chair and a microphone in it and a couple of scripts, and it was all facing away from the 15 or 20 people who were behind me who were doing the evaluation. I go through the whole process and, again, feel pretty good about it and go home and anxiously await a phone call. Well, finally, I get it. Hi, Tim. Dean Hevelin from the Indiana Pacers. How are you? Great, Dean. As you might imagine, it's been very difficult narrowing down. Apparently, they teach this in NBA entertainment school or something. It's been very difficult narrowing down, and we've decided to go with Jerry Baker. Again, Jerry Baker's not my name, but this time there was a whole lot more expectation on the line for me. I thought for sure I had persevered. I thought for sure I had done the work. I thought for sure I had put myself in a place to get this job, and they'd given it to someone else. Now, Jerry Baker, if you're from Indiana or have been there very long, he's in the Indiana Broadcasting Hall of Fame. He did the very first Pacers game when they entered the NBA in the 60s. So despite being like 75 years old, their president said, if Jerry wants the job, Jerry gets the job. And Jerry got the job, and I felt like I had failed again. But this time, it hit a little harder. But remember, and when you're in the middle of failure, you never think this way, but failure is required for success. Michael Jordan, the greatest of all time, missed 26 game-winning shots. His team would have won if he made it, but they lost because he missed, and he's considered the greatest basketball player ever. Kobe Bryant, one of the top 5, missed 14,481 shots in his NBA career, which is more than anybody in the history of the NBA, and yet he's one of the greats. If you're a baseball fan, you know that if a guy gets a hit 1 of every 3 times they're at bat, that means they fail 2/3 of the time. They're going to the Hall of Fame. That's as good as it gets. And they fail 2/3 of the time, right? It's just part of the deal. I had the chance to interview Susie Orman a few years back, and if you're not familiar with Susie, she was on CNBC for a long time. She's a financial guru, New York Times best-selling author, like best friends with Oprah and all that kind of stuff. But she also was named by Time magazine as one of the 100 most influential people in the world a few years back. And she told me all sorts of interesting stories, but the one that I remember best was right after she left the University of Illinois. She got in this old junky van and drove to California, where she was going to start her career. And when she got there, her very first job was at a tiny diner in California. And a number of the people she met at this diner had varying impacts on her life. But 2 young men probably had the biggest impact. She would talk to them every day because they would come in and work on all sorts of harebrained projects, and one of them was called Dial a Joke. And the idea, this was clearly before the internet, was you could call this phone number if you needed to laugh, and when they picked up on the other end, somebody or something would tell you a joke. That was the sum total of their business idea. It, not surprisingly, was not going super well, and they were very disappointed that this and a lot of their other harebrained schemes weren't paying off. In fact, their families were very disappointed that this is how their young men were spending their time. Well, then Susie Orman told me the names of these 2 guys. They were Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs, who, if those names don't ring a bell, they were the eventual co-founders of Apple. They persevered eventually, right? They had failed time and time again. Their own families were laughing at them, and not because the dial-a-joke jokes were funny, but because they thought their ideas were ridiculous. And yet, in the end, they went on to create one of the most powerful companies in all of human history. I have also found that puzzles teach us patience, and I began to think, are patience and perseverance the same thing? I was getting myself confused. I didn't want to make the same point twice here. And so I did a little investigation and a little thinking on it, and I think they're very, very different. Perseverance is trying to overcome a problem or an obstacle by working actively towards a solution. Patience is trying to overcome an obstacle or solve a problem by waiting for that perseverance to pay off. When Elijah, my now 12-year-old, was about 4 or 5 years old, he and I were working on a puzzle together. And it was about the same age that I started working on puzzles with my grandfather, and we were working on one that was clearly too hard for him, but he wanted to help. And so we were working on this thing. And he got into this thing where he wasn't being successful, right? He was trying a piece, wouldn't go in, trying. And so finally, he started holding up pieces and going, "Where's this piece go? Dad, where's this piece go? Dad, where's this piece go?" And it was a big enough puzzle. I didn't know. Like when he was 4 and we were doing the puzzles where there's only one way for one piece to go, I could kind of show him. But in this big puzzle, I had no idea. And so finally I said, "But I promise that piece fits in this puzzle. We're just not ready for it yet." And all of a sudden, I realized, I don't think I'm talking about puzzles anymore. And I might even not be talking to this 5-year-old. I might be speaking more to me. That there are all these pieces in my life that I thought for sure I was ready for right now, that I was hanging on to tightly. Maybe it was that big job. Maybe it was a healthy relationship. Maybe it was financial freedom. Maybe it was any number of things that I wanted desperately right then, but the pieces of my puzzle weren't going together, and I couldn't for the life of me figure out why. Well, it just happened to be that my puzzle wasn't ready for them yet. There were other pieces that had to go together, other things that had to happen before those fit. I had to continue to be persistent in working toward my goals, but I also had to be patient in letting all of that eventually come to fruition. If you've ever done a large jigsaw puzzle, you know that there comes a time when all of a sudden pieces start going in pretty quickly. You've sat with it long enough, you've started to notice color and shape and texture, and you've seen long enough, sometimes it's staring fruitlessly at this puzzle, that you go, oh, that one goes, I was just working on that. Boom, goes in, boom. And pretty soon, you've got most of the puzzle put together. For me, that really started happening about 3 years ago. 1 year after not getting the Indiana Pacers job, and Bill's introduction kind of gave this away, they called and offered me the job. Jerry Baker wasn't working out, and they called and said, would you like to be the next public address announcer of the Indiana Pacers? 8 years. Talk about patience and perseverance. 8 years after applying for the Illinois basketball job in 2007, they offered me that job. Had no idea I'd have to be patient for that amount of time, but it worked out really well. And then these last 2 years have been a bit of a whirlwind. In 2019, almost exactly 2 years ago to the day, the Chicago Bears announced that Jim Reband, who had been doing public address at Soldier Field for 38 years, was going to retire. As soon as I saw that post, man, I was in. Like that, the NFL schedule, it's short. I didn't have much room on my calendar. That was the one I felt I could do. It was a legendary team. And I thought, well, I don't know if I'll get it, but I'll give it a shot. So I immediately applied. Well, I'd like to say 2 weeks later, I got a phone call that said, hi, Tim, Tanisha from the Chicago Bears. That did not happen. It was months and months and months and months before I heard from them. Well, 2 weeks after that posting came out and I had sent in all of my applications, the Chicago Bulls announced that they were also looking for a new public address announcer because Tommy Edwards was retiring, and he and Ray Clay had done that job since 1976, years before I was born. So that tells you how often these jobs come up, almost never. But I saw that post and I'm like, I've been with the Pacers for just over a year at this point. I already have an NBA job. My parents and sister and her family live in Indianapolis. There's no reason for me to leave. I'm not interested. I literally didn't have that thought through my brain for more than a few minutes when I got a text. And it was from a colleague in Chicago who happened to work with a number of sports teams. He goes, hey, Tim, I assume you saw this. Would you mind if the Bulls contacted you? And I wrote back and said, I'm not interested, thanks. And that was it, I thought. Well, when we talk about starting to see our picture a little bit more clearly, that started to happen to me a little bit after I sent that message, because I started to think, what if? What if I am supposed to have all of my professional teams in one city? What if this really... I've tried to figure out the odds of this all happening in the same year, and it like broke the computer. I couldn't come up with what the odds were, but they're very, very small. And so I started thinking, well, if I get the Bears job, then it would make sense to have the Bulls job. So I wrote Chris back and I said, look, tell the Bulls that I'm interested if and only if I get the Bears job. I know how that sounds coming out of my mouth. I wasn't trying to be egotistical. I wasn't trying to strong-arm anybody. They don't work together. They're like nobody was making decisions together. But I thought, this is the only way it makes sense to me. I'm not just going to leave one other team to go to even though the Bulls have like the best introduction sequence in the history of sports, they were my team, I just couldn't leave the Pacers just because. But this way, it made it make sense. And not only would it make sense, it would have made history. Because nobody in the world has 3 professional teams in the same city, and only one person in the world has 3 professional teams at all. And so I knew the chances were slim, very slim, but I thought, why not? Never could I have imagined how things would play out, because right as the interview processes started for both teams, the world came to a grinding halt. It was March 11th of 2020 when literally the world shut down. I was working the Big Ten tournament and had to tell everybody to go home because of this little thing called COVID. And for the next 4 months, there was no work for anybody in sports. I had literally nothing to do. And teams stopped interviewing. They stopped bringing people in to audition. And so all of a sudden, these jobs that I at least thought I might have a chance at one of them seemed to have gone away. Well, the NBA, thankfully, figured out a way to do the rest of their season in what they called the bubble. And Bill referenced this earlier. The bubble was basically a resort on the Disney World campus, along with some basketball arenas, where the entire NBA and a few other people would go to finish the season. And I was one of 4 public address announcers who got a chance to go to that. And while I was there, just a few weeks after, I got that phone call finally from the Bears, and this time it was offering me the job. And I was thrilled, as you might imagine. And I won't go through all the theatrics of how that phone call went, but it was super cool. The Bulls then heard about that, and they sent a message and said, hey, are you still interested in our job? We haven't made a decision either. I'm like, well, sure, why not? They said, but here's what we need. We need you to do an audition so our team president can hear what you would sound like doing the Bulls introduction. I'm stuck inside a hotel room at Disney World. I don't know how to do that for you at the moment. I have a computer and I have a microphone. They're like, we'll send you a script. It doesn't have to be perfect. Whatever, just send it as soon as you can. And so I got to this closet, in literally a closet in my room. I stuffed it with pillows and sweatshirts and anything I could do to possibly dampen the sound. And I set my microphone right in the middle, and I did something like this. Keep in mind, I have neighbors right on the wall, on the other walls, and I'm in there going, and now the starting lineup for your Chicago Bulls! And I got the job. I didn't do that part. That part was not perfect. To be clear, I didn't do the "and I got the job" part in the audition. That was just for you guys. It would have been a little presumptuous. We all have highlight moments in our life that when people see us or think of us, they automatically think of X. For you, maybe it's a graduation, an accomplishment, a skill you've learned better than most who could do it, the birth of a child, the graduation of a child, getting married. There are all sorts of things that highlight our life. And for me, I've put some pictures up on the screen here, or we will in just a second, of highlights from my life. And many of them we've talked about today. From working in television to the Bears, time with my boys, even emceeing this event last year, the Bulls, the All-Star Game, writing a book. Those are kind of the moments in my life that are the resume builders, the ones you like to talk about, right? They make up part of my story. But they aren't my full story. There are things that aren't so great as well. And this next set of pictures illustrates some of those. Now, I know on the surface it doesn't necessarily look like these are bad things, but they represent difficult times in my life. My mom, about 15 years ago, was diagnosed with colon cancer, and we weren't sure if she was going to make it. Now, thankfully, she has, but that was a tough time for us. The picture of the boys in the corner was when we were living in literally a makeshift apartment attached to a friend's garage when going through the divorce with their mom. There were pictures of our family burned in a fireplace that I snapped a picture of because I knew one day I would be able to look at that again. I had to move away for 6 months to start my company and be away from the family. That was the house I had to sell 4 years ago because I couldn't afford, whether with financially or with my time, to take care of it anymore. The empty stands, we talked about that, 4 months of no job. And these were all times in my life that I wasn't sure what my picture was going to look like. The bottom right picture is going to take a little explanation, and if you're close enough to read it, you're probably like, what in the world is he doing? So in first grade, my family moved to Indiana so my dad could continue school. And as a first grader, you know, you don't have any friends, you don't know what's going to happen. Everything's very, very scary, and I remember specifically being scared. Well, at the apartment complex where we were living, I made some not-so-great friends who were teaching me some not-so-great words. And so one day at school, I decided I was done with my math, and the teacher said, keep yourself busy. So I pulled out a piece of that lined paper that everybody remembers from when they were a kid, and I wrote bad word page across the top, and then I numbered them and wrote down all the bad words that I had learned. Now, you'll see the rectangles, I had to blur some of them out because not only did I learn them, I learned how to spell them correctly. Ironically, this is also the list of words that I use with the Christmas lights all the time, so that may or may not happen from time to time. The beauty is neither one of these things defines us. They are part of our story, but none of those is completely defining of who we are. In fact, when you put them together, you get this. Every single piece is important, good or bad. I was watching a TV show a couple years ago, and I think it's still on, actually, A Million Little Things. Everybody seen that? I won't give anything away if you haven't watched it, but I will tell you a little bit of the beginning. This is about a group of friends who had been very, very close for years and years and years, and at literally the first scene of the very first episode, one of those friends unexpectedly commits suicide, and it rocks their group. And the first 3 episodes, probably maybe 4 episodes, you see them going through all the stages of grief. And by about episode 3, they are very firmly planted in anger, and they're almost going around the room saying, I thought John was such a good guy. I thought John loved his family. I thought John was this, this, and this. All these things that they thought he was. And finally, after they'd gotten all of that out of their system, there was this silence. And one of the friends spoke up and said, John was all of those things, but he was also human. And we are imperfect people living in an imperfect world, and just like no one success defines who we are, no one failure defines who we are either. I love this phrase, success isn't final, and failure isn't fatal. I'll say it again, success isn't final. The success is in there. That doesn't mean any of us have arrived, and same thing with your picture. But the failures don't mean it's the end. It's all just part of our picture. And I don't know what it is that you're feeling like a failure about tonight, but my guess is it's something. Maybe it's at home, maybe it's at work, maybe it's a relationship you're trying to restore, maybe it's a habit you're trying to break, or some sort of addiction you're trying to kick. There's all sorts of things that could be making you feel like a failure tonight. But whatever that is, it does not have to define you. Is it part of your story? Absolutely. Is it your story? Absolutely not. Whatever it is you're holding on to right now so tightly, like I was throughout my career and probably still will at times throughout my life, maybe it's a job you really want. Maybe it's a child who's walked away that you can't figure out why they're not back. Maybe it's something with a spouse or a friend. I don't know what your thing is today. But maybe like Elijah, it's a piece you need to set down for a little while because you're just not ready for it yet. There are other pieces of your life that you don't know are coming that still have to be put in place before you are ready for that thing. There's a good chance that that piece fits in your puzzle, but you're just not ready for it yet. It may be a little hard to see in this picture, but there are more people than just me in those pictures. There are all sorts of people in my life that are important that make me who I am. My parents, my kids, bosses, coworkers, friends, others who've impacted my life in some way, shape, or form. And I think that's a reminder for us tonight that in addition to our own stories, we are also pieces in other people's puzzle, right? Like, it's not just about us. You maybe notice that there are some puzzle pieces scattered on the center of your table. And if you haven't taken one already, I encourage you to grab one before you leave, just as a little reminder. I'm calling it Jeremiah's piece, and I'm doing it for this reason. It's a piece of a puzzle that's not yours, but that's still critical. right? We all have an opportunity to be the piece that somebody else is waiting for whatever reason. We might not even know it. But tonight, you are here because you're a piece of the Lifeline puzzle. In some way, shape, or form, you can be that piece. The question is, are you going to give it? You are the piece of a puzzle for those guys sitting in the back corner. You are a piece of the puzzle for many families in this community who are affected by addiction. You are the piece of the puzzle for guys who are hurting, abandoned, hopeless, on the verge of suicide, strung out on something, who've never heard of Lifeline yet, but who one day will, who need your piece tonight. And maybe a junior high or high school student who hasn't touched a drug yet, but when they find their drug of choice and they find themselves in the position that so many others have, they will be counting on the piece that you have in your hand this evening. The question is, are you going to give it? I would never ask anybody to do something I'm not willing to do. I'm going to start, and I hope you'll follow. Every single piece counts. Thank you.
Tim, thank you so much. That was so impactful. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being such a key part of Lifeline-connect. I told you today that I had 4 stages of my experience within recovery. The first I read in a book, and that was very interesting and compelling. I hadn't been exposed to that type of things that you've heard many stories tonight. The second was through a coworker of mine that I worked with, and he brought in even more detail and more focus to that as I learned firsthand from recovering men what recovery really looked like. The third stage was getting involved through Lands at Lifeline-connect and going out every week and meeting guys like the gentleman back there at that table, hearing their stories, where they come from, and like many of the stories that you heard tonight. My fourth stage is when I had to go through with my family, when I had members in my family afflicted with drug addiction. In fact, my sister Kelly, pictured here, with alcohol addiction. And I can tell you, you think you know recovery until you're in it. It's not what's in the book. It's real. And I was really, really fortunate. I want to tell you about my sister Kelly. She's a single mother of 2, a sexual assault survivor who on her 3rd DUI had her license and her freedom taken away. Like Autumn, her 90 was in jail, right? Everything taken from her. Her kids were devastated. My family was devastated. If I did not have the support from Drew and Jen Cook, who helped me, and all my friends at Lifeline-connect, and especially Randy and Suzanne Brown, I don't know what we would have done. The program helped my family learn one of the most important lessons of recovery that I have learned, and it's called Your Love is Killing Me. And it's about enablement. And our family had to learn that although we loved my sister so dearly, that some of the things that we were doing were enabling. That some of the conversations that we weren't having that needed to be had needed to happen. And so again, I thank Drew and Jen, and I thank Randy and Suzanne, and I thank God for Lifeline-connect and Brenda and David and my friendships there. Without it, we would have been like a lot of people find themselves in the grips of addiction. Where do you go? What do you do? This is my sister today, fully employed as a nurse. Just last weekend, we moved her out of my parents' house and into her own apartment with her kids. That's her 2-year sobriety chip. She just got her driving privileges back. She's been to the bottom, like many of the stories you heard tonight. And yet, like Joey, she's a survivor, and she's tough, and she's in great shape, and she's writing a whole new chapter in her life. I pray that none of you have to experience recovery at that level or closer, because there's only one step closer, and that's addiction itself. That is the only step closer as a parent or as a wife like Megan. And that's almost harder, watching somebody you love in such pain. I pray that none of you have to experience this in your family. But unfortunately, most of us know someone in our family. We maybe know a coworker. We know a dear friend. We know someone who is struggling through addiction. I just want to ask each and every person here tonight, like Tim said, be that puzzle piece. And I want to ask everyone here, grab your phones. Pull out your phone. Lifeline-connect.org, right? And I want you to go there, and I want you to bookmark that site for a variety of reasons. Number one, you might know that friend, that coworker, that loved one. They might need somewhere to go, and I want you to encourage them to come to Lifeline Connect. Number two, all of the businesses and all of the partners that made tonight possible. If you're from this community and you're looking for goods and services, please support these local businesses that support Lifeline Connect. Know who they are. Thank them so that they can continue to support. And there's a really easy way to make a donation on here. It's so easy. It's like ordering a pizza, right? Go right on there, hit donate. Something that you can give, something that you might feel compelled to do tonight, something that you could do on a monthly basis to help cover that $685 daily to help those guys get the help that they need and more so, right? That's one way that you can do it. You can also text the DREAM to 833-747-0757. You can go to lifelineconnect.org. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, on your tables, there's also a donation card, right? If you feel so compelled, as you exit, find someone from Lifeline Connect with the tag on. They can take your donations tonight. I am very pleased to announce at this point, we've raised well over $100,000 just through the strong corporate support. There is a match for the first $40,000 of anything we do tonight. That means your 50 becomes 100. Your 100 becomes 2, and your 500 becomes 1,000. For the first 40,000, we have another match. So I just want to, once again, I want to thank everybody for your attendance tonight. We're so glad to have so many new faces and new people out here tonight. I want to thank all of the partners, all of the friends of, all of the premier partners, the presenting partners, all of the table sponsors, everyone who gave up a night tonight to come and spend it and learn a little bit more about Lifeline Connect and about recovery. Please do what you can, and again, God bless Lifeline Connect. Thank you for your attendance tonight. Good night, and God bless.